on now? Okay. Open with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to gather in Rotary Fellowship. We thank you for the beauty of the day. We thank you for the beauty of the season. Everything is so green and lush. As we meet as Rotarians, we ask that you keep us ever mindful of our four-way test, which we use at the close of each meeting. Help us, O Lord, to think about these words as we say them, that we can go out in the community and be better Rotarians and build a better community. This is true, too, of service above self, which is our motto. Let us live this and make it true. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, it's been a while since I've been up here. I'm doing double duty as secretary and longtime past president today. Judy will be back with us next week. And Kent was out of town, our president-elect, so Kent and I talked last night, and we were thinking about having a more recent past president up here, but she decided she wanted to sit back and relax today. So I'm up here going back from the past.
Sure, I didn't want my mother-in-law critiquing me.
That'll be all right too. As secretary, I did want to just pass on a compliment to the club, and we have pretty good attendance today as well. Not quite as good as some of the times in April, but I think I've been secretary for about 5 years now, and I think last month we had the highest attendance that we've had in all that time. We had 67%. We had good attendance, good turnout at the auction, which counted as one of our meetings, and then a number of other events. We were able to plug people in for makeups, and so we pretty high up for our Fairfield club, and will definitely not be listed as number 53 or 54 where we usually are in the district attendance. Last week was a good week for the club. We had our group study exchange from Argentina. It was very enjoyable. Most of you met the group last Friday when they were here, and the host families, we had a number of things that we did through the weekend. It was very enjoyable. Dean and Marcia Holst were one of the host families, John Simplot family, Kent and Rhonda Whitney, Jim and Susie Rubis, and Sally and Terry Hayes. And Sally and Terry deserve an extra thanks. On Saturday night, we had a barbecue out at the county park, and despite the muddy weather and the threat of rain clouds and almost no wind, which is also bad for balloons, and risking getting their balloon muddy in the wet grounds, we did get to take all of the folks from Argentina up for a very short tethered balloon ride. So they didn't get to go across the county, but at least got to sample what it's like to go up in a balloon, and I got to go up too for my first time. So Sally and Terry did that, and we were a little bit iffy with the weather, but it was good to have them be able to do that. And that was one of the things they were really looking forward to when they came to Fairfield. It was on their itinerary, and that was the thing they were talking about. So it's good that we didn't disappoint them there. Sally also did additional duty. She took them up to Oskaloosa Monday morning, and then on Friday, Bob Austin and who was the other driver on Friday? Oh, Jody Kerr brought them here from the previous visit. So they're all in Chicago now, except for Maria Elena. She's in Gettysburg. She was the one that mentioned, she did the program last week, that she's involved with sculpture in her home city, and there was a group of sculptors from Gettysburg won an award, so when they found out she was coming to the States, they wanted her to go out to Gettysburg. So she's in Gettysburg this weekend touring there. So a very rewarding experience for the club, and I know the folks from Argentina enjoyed it, and several of us will be communicating with them as time goes. So a good, yes.
I might just echo what Jim said. It really was interesting to get to know these people better and learn more about their country and the people. One of the interesting things I wanted to share that I still chuckle about is that as we were going through town, we saw a squirrel, and we take squirrels for granted here. And then, in fact, we came upon a dead squirrel as we made one trip through town. But our guest never saw a squirrel before. We found out that they have no squirrels in Argentina. And as we started talking more about the squirrels, I said, well, do you have raccoons? They don't have raccoons in Argentina. They don't have possums in Argentina. But she did bring along a little folder which showed some of the animals they do have. And they have animals there that we don't have, that they take for granted. But they do have rats and mice, but no squirrels or coons.
One other thing that a lot of people misunderstand about this group study exchange, only one of the people that was here is actually Rotarian, Daniel, who was the ophthalmologist. He's a Rotarian and he's the leader for the group. The other 4 people were young business people, and they were recruited, not actually recruited, there was a lot of competition for the 4 positions. Facundo told me there were about 35 people that applied for it, and through a series of interviews and tests in English and Spanish, they qualified. So they are not Rotarians, and this group study, we had a group from District 6000 that went down to Argentina at the same time. So if there's anyone in the area that you ever know of that might be interested in doing one of these, that's a possibility. And Kent Whitney has a number of other possible exchange programs that are available for those of us who are retired. 2 or 3 day exchanges all summer. There are working ones, there are social ones, a number of different exchanges. So if you ever think about doing some international travel, be sure to look into some possible Rotary exchanges. A lot of different opportunities out there. Steve Cracker has our program today, so Steve, you want to introduce that? Sure.
I'm pleased to have 2 individuals here today, and I know most of you, if not all of you, know them. First, I have Mary Pettit. Mary's here today in her capacity as president of the Fairfield Women's Club, and she's also a member of the McElhinney House Foundation Board. Then I have Lane Bush. Lane is president of the McElhinney House Foundation Board, and they're going to talk about the Women's Club and the McElhinney House. So, Lane, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for the good lunch and this beautiful May Day, and thanks for inviting us. We do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about one of Jefferson County's oldest treasures, the Elizabeth McElhinney House, and to tell you about some of the projects currently underway to maintain the grand old home. Each of you should have a copy of the brochures. Has everyone got a copy of this? They're just off the press. The ink is hardly dry, so we're glad to have the Fairfield Rotarians as our test market. And thanks to Mary and her committee that we think they turned out pretty professionally. I'd like to begin by saying that Mary and I, along with Rotary members Charlie White and Bob Austin, who couldn't be here today, represent the McElhinney House Foundation. Other members of our board of directors are Frank Bagby, Mel Vidal, Marilyn Hyatt, Kay Gentry, Dixie Johnson, and Loretta Reineberger. And we're in a transition period in the end of this month, so Charlotte Lamb and Evelyn Myers will be taking seats on the foundation board effective the 1st of June. The McElhinney Foundation is a nonprofit organization, nonprofit corporation, and is recognized by the Internal Revenue Service as an eligible recipient of tax-deductible contributions under Section 501c3 of the IRS Code. The McElhinney House is owned by the Fairfield Women's Club. The Women's Club, though, is a civic organization, and as a civic organization, they do not enjoy tax-exempt status, so that explains why the foundation was formed, and that's our purpose for being here. I, at this time, would like to ask Mary to say a few words about the Women's Club. Mary, as Steve said, is a member of the Foundation Board of Directors, is the new president of the Fairfield Women's Club. She, like many of our other board members, have a lifetime of experience to draw on, and she's a great credit to our board.
Well, thank you very much for having us. On behalf of the 140-some members of Women's Club, we really do appreciate this opportunity. And I was thinking a few minutes ago, you people have had the pleasure of dining at the McElhinney House during the couple of weeks in the winter when the country club was closed, and we hope that you had a wonderful time. We feel that the McElhinney House is actually a one-of-a-kind facility that is available to our community. We treasure it a great deal. I think Lane and I must love it a great deal, or we wouldn't go through some of the things we're going through. And I think the Women's Club members as a whole really love that building, and we love what it represents. And Fairfield has had some very severe jolts in the last few months as far as our not preserving historical buildings. And I think we are vowed that we are going to preserve the McElhinney House in one way or another. Our dining room can seat 75 people, and that's the north room, as we did at the time when we entertained the Harper Brush for their big celebration last fall. And then also, of course, we have a parlor of equal size, which can be used for a meeting pre-dinner, or it has also been used as a hospitality room for hors d'oeuvres and pre-dinner partying. We also are encouraging groups to come there and meet for day-long or even 2 or 3 day conferences. And we'd be happy to feed them at the same time. We did really enjoy having Harper Brush there. It was Linda Wall, who was new on the job, but it was her first experience with anything of that magnitude. And Linda Wall, as you people should know, is a marvelous cook. We're having groups from Mount Pleasant and from Washington come over as a group and eat there. And we're thrilled about that. In fact, Linda Wall already has bookings for September. So if you want to go, maybe you better get your name in. She is providing a full meal. Yesterday I ate there. She had about the best fried chicken in the world. You guys would like that. Mashed potatoes and gravy, a vegetable salad, homemade hot rolls, which she does almost for every meal. They're just wonderful. Your choice of beverages and dessert. And that's the kind of meal that she likes to put out. And people are really being very, very fond of it. We hope to encourage small receptions. We're having several birthday gatherings, family reunions, and we're really ideal for that. They can sit in the parlor and enjoy the visiting or the meeting part and then go to the dining room. So that's nice. However, one more thing I wanted to say. Upstairs, you may not know this, the entire north side is an apartment, which we recently painted in its entirety before Linda moved in. And that is very, very nice, of course, for us. And the south room upstairs, which is equal in size, is a storage room and gives us a place to dress for fashion shows and that sort of thing. However, with our good fortune in owning the McElhinney House comes a lot of financial responsibility. The house is 150 years old, and it does not let us forget it. It reminds us periodically, I'm 150 years old. Do something for me. I hurt. So in the last 6 months, we put in a new furnace, which was a major expenditure. And I am so proud of the Women's Club members because they themselves donated enough money to pay for that furnace. We didn't think we could do it, but we did. We have also recently installed a new commercial dishwasher, which was not inexpensive. We put in Culligan Water Service. Bob Austin, your member and a very valued member of the foundation. He's relatively new, but he's wonderful. Bob Austin has checked out all the air conditioners, worked on them, installed one new one in the apartment upstairs, so we're really, really in good shape. We're just working away. However, as I said, it does not stop. We constantly need the support of the Fairfield community. And you have been wonderful. We've had 2 drives for money. Letters have gone out, and people have been very, very generous. And we're hoping through the work of the foundation and through the brochure, which you have there at the table, to encourage people who are perhaps making last will and testaments. We're going to contact attorneys and CPAs and so on, and hopefully that we can make the proper contacts so that we can build both our McElhinney Foundation and our permanent endowment fund to the point where we have security for the future. Lane is going to tell you about another major expense that's coming up. But I want to thank you for your support. I hope that next Christmas you'll come back and see us again for those 2 weeks in January. and I hope that you enjoyed your visit there. And we would certainly encourage you and your family for small parties, large parties. Contact Linda Wall at the McElhinney House. She'll be happy to take care of you.
Thank you, Mary. Now, for a few moments, I would like to take you back to a time when only Native Americans lived in this land. It's appropriate to quote from La Salle's report to the King of France after his exploration of the American heartland in 1677. In speaking of the Mississippi Valley region, he said, "It is nearly all so beautiful and so fertile, so free from forests and so full of meadows, brooks and rivers, so abounding in fish, game and venison." And I thought I would say here, and I don't see Dean, but they probably saw raccoons, squirrels, and possum when they got here. And he went on to say that one can find there in plenty all that is needed for the support of flourishing colonies. When the first settlers came to this region in 1836, they saw what La Salle had described: large areas of undisturbed prairie grass, some more than 6 feet tall with scattered large trees in the sloughs, and timbered areas in the distant perimeters, abundant wildlife, a very pristine setting. My grandfather's grandfather, who was William G. Coop, was one of the first settlers to arrive in this county. My grandfather told me of the timberlands being clean. There was no undergrowth. The Indians scavenged the fallen branches for firewood. He described the timberlands as looking like a park. That is how this area appeared to the settlers where we see Fairfield today. In 1839, the stake that was driven into the center of what is now Central Park to mark this little settlement was surrounded by a large area of tall native grass. If you can imagine it waving in the wind with sprinkled with bright blooming wildflowers, fringed with large trees growing in a regular pattern on the outskirts. A very attractive place to come and build a new life. This fertile land, blessed with a climate suitable for growing an abundant food supply, brought European settlers westward. Here in Jefferson County, the pioneers found clay suitable for brick, outcroppings of coal and limestone along the creek banks, and bee trees full of honey. There were no roads, there were no bridges, only trails through the forest and grassland made by wildlife and Native Americans. The oxen pulling wagons followed Indian trails when they could. The trails usually marked the safest ground through the swamps and the easiest fords over the streams. A fellow by the name of John Rush Parsons, who had built his cabin 6 miles east of Fairfield in the area that most of us know as Parsonsville, grew tired of trying to make his way through the tall prairie grass to this area, so he hitched his 8 oxen to a sod plow. He could hardly see the front yoke of oxen through the tall grass as he plowed a furrow from his home as straight as he could make it to Fairfield. It took him 2 days to accomplish this, and that footpath then became a wagon trail, and it probably is the route that Highway 34 follows today. In 1838, the area of what is now Jefferson County was then a part of Henry County. The settlement, eventually called Fairfield, was originally named Paynesville. In the original legislative bill to divide Henry County into 2 counties, and the bill was submitted by Representative William Coop, the name Paynesville was stricken and Randolph was substituted, but that didn't matter because Governor Lucas vetoed that bill. Then in the bill later enacted to form this county of Jefferson, a name for this settlement was not included. And it was about this time that during a meeting at the Bonifield home that Mrs. Rodham Bonifield suggested Fairfield would be an appropriate name, and it was officially adopted. Fairfield was incorporated the first Monday of March, 1839. The first home building in Fairfield was in Lot 8 of Block 8, which was located and is located near where Larry's Barber Shop stands today. That's the northeast corner of the square. It was built by William Houston in 1839, a log home 10 feet by 12 feet. By the Treaty of 1842, the Sac and Fox Indians were required to move westward out of the 40-mile strip that lay west of the Mississippi River. In that year, a land office was established in Fairfield, which served as a gateway and trading center for settlers into the newly opened Indian lands. Ward Lamson, which is a well-known name yet to this day in this community, was the land agent at that time with a reputation for fair dealing. This little town of Fairfield became a very busy place, helping to originate a term that is still very familiar to us. They were doing a land office business, and I didn't know where that came from until I was doing preparation for this. The lure of the new lands west of the Mississippi was very strong. Word of the opportunities that lay here reached a 40-year-old prosperous merchant in Washington, Pennsylvania, and his name was Robert McElhinney. He traveled down the Ohio and Mississippi rivers to Keokuk, then by wagon to Fairfield. He liked what he saw here, and in January 1846, he bought 2 lots where the McElhinney house stands today from the city for $60. In that year, he moved his family to this town. Robert McElhinney was a man of means, having prospered as a store owner and businessman while he was in Pennsylvania. He wanted to become part of this excitement in this new land, and he became very active in community affairs. Mr. McElhinney was a lover of home life, and he longed for a permanent home, so he set out to build his idea of a beautiful and accommodating home for his family. He knew of a New England carpenter who could design a structure with graceful lines embodying New England dignity and Southern hospitality, and the carpenter's name was Mr. John Lynn. It's another name that still remains in the community. The arduous task of constructing the home was started that year, 1846. Mr. Lynn and his 3 sons went to lands along the Skunk River, north and east of Fairfield, and began cutting and hewing the timber for the house. It is nearly impossible for us to comprehend the difficulties that they must have faced in accomplishing this task. To move wagons and with teams of oxen along trails through the prairie grass, and trails cut through the timberland, crossing creeks and waterways by driving the teams through them, then arriving at the timbered area to build a camp there and live off the land, and hunting and fishing for their sustenance. And they would live at the camp for days and weeks while they worked. The trees would have to be felled by axes and crosscut saws, and the logs loaded on the wagons. The timber for framing the house was all hewn by hand. The weather would have played a major factor in preventing hauling for weeks at a time. It would be difficult to guess how many round trips would have been required to move the timbers to the lot where the house stands today. It is easy to understand why the project lasted more than 5 years and was not completed until 1851. There were fireplaces in every room, including the 5 upstairs bedrooms. Mrs. McElhinney was known for her hospitality, and this home became a center of social activities. And you might see in the photos on the brochure of the parlor, which looks very much the same today as it did in the early days, a warm and comfortable place for family activities and entertaining their friends. The house was constructed with strength. Think about how many winters and summer storms that it has seen, including the tornado of 1851, very soon after it was completed, that completely destroyed several buildings in this town. But today, after 150 years, it stands straight and proud as one of the oldest homes west of the Mississippi River. The McElhinney House stands for Jefferson County's rich history. It is one of the community's remaining connections to the past. This home has seen the migration of the American Indian westward from their native homes. It has seen the Iowa Territory become a state in 1846. It saw the founding of a branch of the State University of Iowa in January of 1849, with the home's owner, Robert McElhinney, serving on the first board of directors. It witnessed the fervent westward expansion through the Fairfield Land Office, opened in 1850. And it saw the formation of the Jefferson County Library Association in 1853 with Robert McElhinney as its president, and 40 years later, the first Carnegie Public Library built in Iowa. It was here when the first Iowa State Fair was held in Fairfield in October of 1854, and the establishment in 1858 by the Iowa legislature of a state agricultural college and model farm, which was a foster child of Iowa State University at Ames. The old home watched as the first train chugged through Fairfield in September of 1858, opening markets to all of the world. The old house stood silent as nighttime saw Negro slaves passing northward through underground stations in this town. And it saw 1,600 men from Jefferson County march off to service in the Union Army. Then it watched as men marched off to Europe to the war to end all wars, and watched as men and women left for all the wars since. It saw the founding of Parsons College in 1875 with Christian S. McElhinney, who was born and raised in this home, being a member of the first graduating class. It witnessed the birth of Loudon Machinery Company in 1881 and the industrial growth at that time. In 1908, it watched the construction of Barhyte Chapel on the campus of Parsons College, and now 93 years later is waiting for its demise. This house saw 85 churches built in this county before 1939. The home served as a meeting place for community leaders who were discussing events vital to the future of this community. It saw happiness and it saw grief during the 69 years it remained in the McElhinney family, and it helped make lasting memories for students who attended school there from 1920 to 1931. Today, as we watch the changes taking place around us, this monument stands as a link to the past, and it reminds us of the need for us to preserve our heritage. The McElhinney House Foundation Board and the Fairfield Women's Club, with the support of the Fairfield community, are working toward long-term preservation of this stately home that we see as a symbol of the spirit of this Fairfield community. We have made application to the state of Iowa for a state historical grant, thanks to the efforts of Mel Vidal, who is our committee chairperson, and thanks to Dale Krause, who heads up the Pathfinders Resource and Conservation Development here in Fairfield. It is a time-consuming process. Any who may have been have sometime worked with a grant application know that it's very difficult. But thanks to our committee, it was very professionally done, and we are waiting with our fingers crossed to hear the outcome, which we should know in the next 30 days whether we'll be awarded the grant or not. I did bring along some roofing shingles that were blown off the house in the last month or so, and I'll just show you. These are the tabs that we found out in the yard. The roof is needing to be replaced. And we're planning to do it this summer. Our board has been and continues to be the benefactor of the great generosity of the people of this area. We feel we have a responsibility to the community to do what needs to be done to preserve this building, and the roof can't wait. Even though the roof is primary, there are many other projects that need to be accomplished, including some foundation work, and the list goes on. To provide for long-term care and maintenance of this home, the McElhinney Foundation has established a permanent endowment fund that Mary mentioned, and it's noted on the brochure. Only the generated income from this fund will be used. The principal will remain intact into perpetuity. It is our hope that if the permanent endowment fund will grow to sufficient size, we can, in this generation, ensure that the McElhinney House will remain a great source of pride for this community for generations to come. Thank you for inviting us today. If there are any questions, I'm glad to answer them for you. Otherwise, thank you very, very much.
I do have one question for Mary. With the McElhinney House, I realize that most of the meetings you like to have the meals, but what's the basic charge if there's a group that wants to use the facility for a meeting without meal service?
Basic charge of $25.
Okay.
Although it is dependent somewhat on what they're going to do, how long they'll be there. But we do have a basic charge of $25.
I know this is something there is still, even with the library meeting room and some other facilities that are now available, are a lot of groups wanting to meet, and the various places get booked up. Well, it was a very interesting program, a couple of different aspects. Lane, all the history there was really interesting. It sounds like something I should maybe have in my pamphlet file. We did enjoy our meals there last January, and it's nice to see historic preservation has got kind of a big name in Fairfield right now, but a lot of it is just name and kind of some steam blowing. These are some folks who've been doing it for a long time and are continuing, so you deserve compliments for what you're doing. We'll close with the four-way test. Is it truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?